My family, I swear, silent all day, all day. The second I tell them that I'm gonna film, chaos. Macho, I'm trying to film. Greetings and salutations, my dearest friends. My name is Samantha, and today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I have given 5 stars this year so far. Hello, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. I'm really excited to be filming today's video because I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I've been loving recently. I thought it would be really fun to do a little check-in and talk about some of the books that I've been loving, some of the books that I know are going to make like my favorite of the entire year list. This year I have been a lot more intentional in sharing what I'm reading. A lot of times I will read something and just give it a star rating on Goodreads and then just never talk about it. So I've been trying to leave reviews, film wrap-ups, all that jazz. I recently post a quarterly wrap-up video. It was more of a collection of things that I've been loving over the past couple months. I talked about my favorite book from each month, but I also talked about my bookish favorites, skincare, makeup, food. It was like a mosh posh of things. This video is going to be a little bit more detailed, where I'm going to really dive into all of the books that I've given 5 stars, why I love them so much, go over the synopsis and things like that. Let's go ahead and hop into all of the books that I've given 5 stars. I'm working late because I'm a singer. You look so cute around my finger. I have given some 5 stars this month, but we're only going to be going over the first quarter, so the months of January through March. Those 3 months I read 41 books and I gave 10 of them 5 stars. Now with those 10 books, I am not including any rereads. I reread books literally all the time. It's definitely a comfort thing to me to kind of like reach back to my favorite books and reread them and annotate them. Sometimes I'll just read favorite chapters or scenes, and then sometimes I'll reread the whole book. So I don't count that towards my numbers, and I have had a lot of rereads this year. Let's go ahead and start with my very first 5-star of the year. That was Twilight of Embers by Tessa Hale. This is the first book in the Dragons of Embers Hollow series. This is a paranormal why choose romance. I am a huge fan of Tessa Hale's writing. I've read a good portion of her backlist. I think there's maybe like 1 or 2 that I haven't read, and I generally rate her books very highly because they are so much fun. They're very fast paced and I just eat them up like candy. This is a new series that she came out with. The book starts off by following our heroine Hayden as she is headed to her first year of college. Growing up, she's had a really hard time. Both of her parents passed away when she was really young, and she was filtered through the foster system, and she's never felt like she has fully fit in wherever she goes. So now that she's headed to college, she wants to fly under the radar and just get her degree. When she gets to the campus, she has a connection with quite a few guys on the campus. The sexy football player and his brother, the professor at her school, a hot billionaire, so many heroes that she ends up having a connection with, and it turns out that they are a group of dragon shifters and she is their fated mate. Really liked the paranormal element to it. Dragon shifters is always a good time. But what I liked most about this book was the why choose element. There was multiple chapters and different point of views, and I feel like each hero was really distinct. Sometimes in why choose and reverse harem, especially if there's a lot of heroes, they all kind of like blend together, but I feel like each one I was rooting for, each one I liked for their own reasons, and I also really liked her heroine, so this one was a fun time. I'll say the first book does end on a cliffhanger, as most of Tessa Hale books do. The second book is already out, so you could technically just binge both of them at the same time. Like I said, her books are very fast paced and you could probably fly through both of them in like a day or 2. By the way, these books aren't in order of my favorites. It's literally in the order that I read them. So the next 5-star that I read was How to Say I Do by Tal Bauer. Bauer predominantly writes male romances, and his books are so romantic. I read a bunch of his books in December of 2023. I was just flying through his backlist and had so many favorites literally the last week of the year. So it almost feels like I kind of read him this year. But How to Say I Do, I did end up reading in January and I loved it so much. It is an angsty male friends to lovers romance with a little bit of a fake dating trope. This book starts off by following our hero Noel, who gets left at the altar on his wedding day. He's engaged to a woman and he ends up getting left on his wedding day, and he decides that he's going to go on his honeymoon. Honeymoon was an all-expensive paid resort in Cancun, and he decides that he's still going to go on the honeymoon and he's going to drown all of his sorrows away with a bottle of tequila. He is also heading to Cancun because his younger brother is getting married there, and when he sees Noel, he realizes that he is going through a hard time and decides to just help him and be a friend to him. They're both headed to the same resort. They end up traveling together, and when they get there, the staff actually mistakes them for the married couple. They have a little bit of a fake dating trope. They end up going all of these adventures in Cancun and having a French lover's romance. This book is so emotional. Both of our heroes are dealing with different things. As they're going through this difficult time, they find solace in each other. I just love the way that Taubauer writes his romance. There is such a beautiful way that he writes emotional connection that it feels like our characters are just soulmates, that they are just meant to be together. And that is like the vibe of all of his books. One of my favorite books of him is You and Me. That is another friends to lovers romance that I would highly recommend. I also really love The Rest of the Story, which was a hockey romance that I read last year. So huge fan of his writing. I've given almost all of his books 5 stars. The next book I read was a part of a series, and that is Lost in the Moment and Found. This is a part of the Wayward Children series by Sean McGuire. I absolutely adore this series. It's a set of short stories that in this world, different doors to different worlds exist. The overall concept is that these kids discover portals to different worlds, and the door and the place that they're taken to depends on their own personality. Some of these books are more adventure portal fantasy, where these kids are being thrusted into this magical universe and learning how to navigate it. And some of those books are actually those kids getting kicked out of those adventurous worlds and back into the normal world, I guess, knowing that magic exists, but then having to cope in like a regular world. They all end up going to the same school, which is Eleanor's School for Wayward Children. This is a really unique fantasy series because all of them do connect into like this larger universe, but then some of them you can read as standalones. Lost in the Moment and Found is one that I would actually say you can read as a standalone. It was a story of Antoinette, who when she was little, her father passes away and she's really grieving that loss. Her mother ends up getting remarried really quickly to a man that she does not trust and does not feel comfortable with. Antoinette does not feel safe with this man that her mother has remarried, and it gets to a point where she feels in such danger that she ends up running away. And in the process of running away, she stumbles upon her door. The door is called a nexus, which is basically like a midway portal to other universes, and it is the place where all of the lost things go. And since our heroine was lost and running away from home, she ends up here. In this process, she discovers that she has the ability to open multiple doors and to travel multiple universes. She's very young when that happens, and she's learning to navigate it, and she doesn't fully understand the consequences of this new magical universe that she's ended up in. It's such a beautifully written story. There are a lot of trigger warnings. There's trigger warnings for loss of a loved one and mention of grooming and assault, so make sure to check out those trigger warnings before you jump into the book. But I just think that Sean McGuire writes everything with such care and such talent, and I adore this series. I do have a lot of reading vlogs for these books because I've just been loving filming reading vlogs recently, so any book that I have a reading vlog for, I will leave linked down below. The next book that I gave 5 stars was Broken Ice by Marina Vivancos. I talk about Marina Vivancos so much on my channel because she is absolutely my favorite author of all time, and I do not say that lightly. I love Marina Vivancos. I mean that with my whole heart and soul. I adore her books. I read her entire backlist. I've given pretty much all of them 5 stars. She's an author that predominantly writes on Kindle Unlimited, and her books are stunning. She writes a bunch of queer romances that are deeply emotional and sweepingly romantic. They have the most amazing diversity and mental health rep, and I just think she is the most talented of them all, okay? I adore her books. Like I said, I did end up rereading a bunch of her books this year, but a new release that she came out with that I really loved was Broken Ice. This is the 4th book in her Alpha Omega hockey series, but it can absolutely be read as a standalone. This book is exactly as the series sounds. It's a hockey romance set in a Omegaverse universe, and it is a male-male romance. Both of our characters are professional hockey players. It starts off by following our hero, Bo, who is an Omega, and he is playing hockey, which is an alpha dominated sport. Didn't have the best experience with his previous team, and he ends up getting traded to a new team. And when he gets traded there, he is really nervous because he thinks that one of the alphas there does not like him. The other alpha is our hero, Emilio. He is this stoic, grumpy alpha. Had a little bit of a sports rivalry going on, but now that they're playing on the same team, they realize they also have such an intense chemistry with one another. Bo actually has a medical condition that as an Omega, his heats are very intense and they're very frequent, so he needs a compatible alpha to help him get through those heats, and guess who is the compatible alpha? Our hero, of course. So they end up entering into like this friends with benefits situation, and it follows the romance. I love this one. The banter between the characters is so funny. If you're not familiar with Omegaverse, I actually think this is a good one to start with because Marina Vivancos does a fantastic job at explaining the dynamics. I feel like Omegaverse that has like a lot of heats and caretaking and nodding. this is the book for you. I loved it. 5 stars. Another book that I was just so obsessed with when I read it, it literally became my entire personality, and that is Serpentine Valentine by Chiana Darling. This is a sapphic dark academia romance with a little bit of a Medusa retelling. This is another one that does have a lot of trigger warnings, so just take care and check those out before you pick this book up. I'm a very sensitive and emotional person. I'm a Cancer, so I find myself always gravitating towards books that, you know, have me in my feelings, that are just deep and sweepingly romantic and, you know, all that. I do recognize that I am a person who is not easily triggered when I'm reading books, but I always like to just, you know, give you guys those trigger warnings so you can know before going in. Got off on a little tangent, but again, Serpentine Valentine, sapphic dark academia romance. It starts off by following our heroine Lex, who is in college, and in the beginning of the book, she is taken advantage of and assaulted by a man that she thought that she could trust. Her professor ends up assaulting her. When it happens, the people around her that she thought that she could also trust and, you know, were there to take care of her, don't end up believing her. The professor at the university, who is a woman who was her mentor and that she was very close to, actually tries to cover up the whole situation. And it becomes this really dark thing that she has to deal with. And when she comes back in the next semester, she wants revenge. She is back with a vengeance. She wants revenge on the man that hurt her and revenge against the woman who tried to cover it up. And in that revenge, she ends up seducing the president of the university's daughter. That's where a heroine comes in. That's where the sapphic romance comes in. The book is so beautifully written. Because it does have a Medusa retelling, there's a lot of references to classic literature and Greek mythology and even like pop culture. The writing is very lyrical and flowery, and I feel like if you are like a classic literature nerd, you would love the writing of this. The reason this book resonates so much with me is I feel like this book really describes the queer experience. I mean, everyone's experience in their sexuality and coming out and things like that is different, but I feel like the way that this was written, I just really resonated with and felt so seen. And then it also embodies like the epitome of female rage and like women empowerment, and it just does so much so well. Okay, the next book is a little more lighthearted, and that is The Fake Mate by Lana Ferguson. This is another Omegaverse, but it is a contemporary romance. This is another one that I would say that if you are new to Omegaverse and you're not really familiar with the dynamic, haven't really read any of like the wild, crazy ones on AO3, this one is a really good one to start with because again, the dynamics are explained really well. Omegaverse is basically as if shifter romances and fated mates had a baby. We just combine them together. So in this one, our heroine is an Omega and our hero is an Alpha. They are both doctors at the same hospital. The heroine is constantly being set up on the most awful dates by her grandmother, and she is desperate to get her grandmother off of her back. And then our hero is actually facing some trouble at work. In this world, there is a stereotype that Alphas are very aggressive, can't be really trusted in positions like in the medical field. None of those things are really true, but he doesn't want that stereotype put on him, so he doesn't disclose that he's an alpha when he starts working there. And then his job finds out, and there is this idea that alphas who are mated are a little bit more calm and able to be more in control. He is looking for someone who could pretend to be his fake mate, hence the title. This is a fake dating romance. They both have something to gain from this situationship. Obviously, in this fake dating scenario, real feelings get involved. This one is just a fun time. It's pretty steamy. I really liked the audiobook. It has a Grumpy Sunshine pairing, and I just think our characters were really well suited for one another, so I really enjoyed reading this one. Actually, that was the last romance book that I ended up giving 5 stars. The next 4 books, I have some fantasy, a classic, and a cozy mystery. Next up, I ended up reading a classic. I was filming a video where I was reading a bunch of sapphic vampire books, and I ended up picking up Carmela because that is like the classic vampire book. It's essentially what Dracula was inspired by. This book was written in like 1872 or something, and I picked it up because I was filming that video, not really thinking much of it, and I ended up loving it. If you guys didn't know, I am a huge Dracula fan. I love anything vampire. This one is a sapphic vampire book. It follows our heroine Laura, who lives in an isolated mansion with her family. It's obviously set in a historical time period, and Laura is feeling really lonely until one day there is a carriage accident right outside of her family's estate. That is where she meets Carmela. Carmela is involved in this carriage accident. She seems to be injured. She ends up persuading Laura and her family to invite her into their home, and it follows the story from there. obviously we know, you and I know, Carmela is a vampire. Laura, our main heroine, has actually had different interactions with paranormal creatures. It's kind of like hinted towards the beginning of the book, but it's not really delved into until she meets Carmela. And yeah, I absolutely loved this one. Writing was actually really easy to digest for it to be a classic. It didn't feel pretentious or difficult to go through. It was a little seductive, a little gory, had a little bit of horror, a little bit of romance. I loved the whole thing. It was a great classic. The next two I read were some fantasy books that I picked up and really had a good time with. So the first one is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This one is a fantasy book and it does have like a romance side plot. It follows our heroine who at a very young age is cursed by a fairy. At the beginning of this book, this fairy comes to basically kidnap her. Kind of told that her mother ended up making a deal with this fairy and promising him her firstborn, which is our heroine. However, when he comes to collect her cousin is with her and ends up defending her. Fairy ends up getting injured, but in that process he ends up taking away something from our heroine. What he takes away from her is part of her soul, hence the title, Half a Soul. He literally splits her soul in half, and the parts that he takes are her emotions, so her ability to feel fear or anxiety or even love. She ends up becoming this very monotone person that struggles to pick up on social cues. So as she's getting a little bit older, her cousin really wants to help her. They end up having their first season in London. The reason they end up going to London in particular is that there are rumors that there is the king's magician and sorcerer who could break any curse. So they end up contacting this sorcerer to hopefully break her curse, and in that process they also find that some sinister magical things are happening in London and they want to figure out what it is. Like, I didn't describe that perfectly, but the magic system is really cool and unique. It's also set during a historical time period, so it feels like it kind of transcends genres. You have a little bit of historical romance, you have a little bit of a fantasy element, magic going on, just lots of things, and I really enjoyed it. The audiobook is fantastic. Like, the next fantasy book that I really enjoyed and I have talked about endlessly is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. Prior to this year, I have never read a Brandon Sanderson book. I never really considered myself a fantasy girly. His backlist is insane, like absolutely insane. This man writes every second of every day, it feels like, and I just didn't know where to start. I felt so intimidated, and I ended up picking up Tress of the Emerald Sea because I heard a lot of people talking about it, like on Book Talk and here on BookTube, and everyone said I could read it as a standalone, so that's what I did. It was kind of like pitched to me was that it was a fantasy adventure book with a little bit of a Princess Bride retelling. It follows our heroine Tress, who lives surrounded by an emerald sea, hence the title, Tress of the Emerald Sea. The sea is not what like you and I would imagine an ocean to look like. It is not filled with water. It is actually filled with these spores that move by gusts of air. My dad is reading this book right now and he did a really cool comparison that it's kind of what you would imagine like a hockey table to be, where if the power is not on and air is not running through it, the hockey puck will not move. So that's essentially what the sea looks like. These spores are really dangerous, and if they're exposed to any liquid, water, sweat, any bodily fluid, just a drop of it, they explode. Each one has its own reaction to water, and some are more dangerous than others, but it is very dangerous to travel these seas, and it is actually forbidden to do so. The only time you're able to embark on these seas is if you are doing it for trading purposes or you have permission by the king. So our heroine grows up on this island, never expects to leave, until one day her best friend Charlie, who she also has a little bit of a crush on, ends up getting sent away into these dangerous seas by demand of his father and the king. Our heroine ends up getting really nervous when her best friend does not return, and she embarks on this grand adventure to go save the love of her life and her best friend Charlie. I loved this book so much. I can't even put into words how much I loved it. The magic system, wicked cool, so unique, so well explained. I've never read a magic system that was so cool like that, you know what I mean? The audiobook, so well produced. I loved the narrator. I loved how this is almost being told to you as if it's a fairy tale. Then our heroine, oh my god, I loved our heroine so much. Tress is this strong, independent, brave heroine, and I adored her. And this really just started my journey into the Cosmere, into the Brandon Sanderson universe. This is a part of his larger Cosmere universe, but can be read as a standalone. I've slowly been reading some more of his books and having an absolute amazing time. If you're new to Brandon Sanderson, I would recommend starting with his secret projects like Tress of the Emerald Sea, or Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. That one was so, oh, that one was so good. I have a bunch of reading vlogs where I read Brandon Sanderson that I'll leave down below, and I've just been documenting this beautiful journey that I've embarked on, and I'm having a great time. So I'm very happy that I picked up his books. I know I still have a lot more to go, but I'm excited to read them. I feel like I've been talking forever, but I just love these books so much. I could talk about them for hours, but we are on our last book. The last book that I gave 5 stars for the first quarter is A Smoking Bun by Ellie Alexander. This is book 18. 18 in the Bake Shop Mystery Series, which happens to be my favorite cozy mystery series of all time, clearly, because I've read 18 books of this series. Usually cozy mysteries are very, very long. There's like 15, 20 books in a series, and they all loosely connect because they're based in the same town and usually follow the same characters, but you can also read them out of order. That's what's really unique about cozy mysteries. This book is set around the winter time, and Jules' husband Carlos's family is coming to visit. They're coming to visit from Spain. She has all of these excursions and different things to show them as they are in town. One of them includes this hike in these snowy mountains that are really popular in Ashland, Oregon, and have a really beautiful view. So as they are embarking on this hike, bum bum bum, they find a dead body. You find a dead body, and then you need to figure out what happens. This was your classic whodunit cozy mystery. I really enjoyed this one. I am so attached to all of the characters in this series. I don't ever rate any of these books lowly because whenever I read this series, it just feels so comforting. Like, I genuinely feel attached to the characters in these books. So of course I'm going to give it 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed this one. I would highly recommend every book in this series. I think it's really saying something, okay, that I've read 18 books in this series. Like, you know it's my favorite if I am that dedicated to read 18 books. Right, those are all the books that I rated 5 stars. I know this was a very chatty, very long video, but I just wanted to dive into all of my favorites. I feel like this is a good reference point so you guys know what I've been loving this year. Let me know what are some of your favorite books of this year. I would love to check them out. Leave them in the comments down below. I had a lot of honorable mentions. I would say I've had a lot of 4 stars that were super, super close to being 5 stars. I'll post like a quick graphic here on the screen of some books that I really, really loved. I gave 4 stars. I would definitely read more by the author. Again, let me know your favorites, if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. If you stayed this long, oh my gosh, if you stayed this long, I love you. I love you with all my heart. What emoji should we use? Let's pick an emoji we haven't used in a while. What about the one that's like a heart? It's like the hand, the heart, the millennial heart. Go ahead and leave this heart emoji in the comments down below if you have stayed this long and you enjoyed the video, so I know that we are bookish besties. As always, thank you for taking time out of your day to spend time with me. It means the world to me. I hope you guys are all staying happy and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!